Your jump to freelance starts here. Welcome to the jump moment.
You don't need the perfect solution in order to launch your freelance business. In fact, the longer you wait for that perfect solution to come, the higher the chances are that you'll miss your jump moment. This week on the podcast, I'm going to talk about a topic that has been coming up a lot in my various conversations with other creatives who are making the jump to freelance. There's no interview, so this is just some practical insights that might be helpful for you as you're considering making the jump yourself. Change is one of those topics that's really complicated for freelancers. I think usually when something needs to change, we actually kind of take it personally and we read that to say, there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with what I've built. There's something wrong with the business that I'm creating. And I want to challenge that because that is actually a very significant misunderstanding when it comes to what freelance actually is. And this is something that I had to wrestle with early in my time after I had made the jump. What is interesting to me now is I look back over my entire career, both as an employee and running my own business, and there's actually a common thread that has not changed regardless of my employment status. And that's what I want to tell you a little bit about, essentially through story. I want to go through different moments in my career that were really significant in the sense that they brought change about. And I want to present to you 4 different questions that you can ask when you're in the midst of assessing, evaluating, considering what exactly needs to change here in my situation. I find that these questions actually were ones that came up while I was working in an organization. And they're the same questions that come up today when I'm trying to assess what's the next step for me in life, what's the next step for me in my business. So let's start with the first stretch of time that this really began to emerge for me in my career. I was a student in college and I was working at the newspaper. It was called the Chimes. And the job that I had was a photographer. And so I would go out to different, events, or whether it be sporting events. I remember one very clearly. It was kind of the anchor of this story, actually. We were in the process of renovating one of the buildings on campus. And it was a major renovation, and they wanted an update. And the problem is they wanted an update, but the paper had to go to print the next morning. So this was like a really fast turnaround. And so I had to go and figure out a way to get this taken care of quickly. Now, there's a little bit of a future twist here. I had just gotten a digital camera, a DSLR. I mean, they still call them that, but back in the old days, this was an SLR was your film camera, or a DSLR was your digital version of that. So I had just gotten a DSLR, and I now had the ability to turn this project around faster than I ever had been able to in the past with film. And so this is a really good introduction into the 4 questions. The first question when you're assessing change is, how did we used to do it? In some cases, it might be, how are we doing it today if you haven't yet made the change? The next question is, what has changed culturally? So you're looking around and you're saying, is there something different that's going on that is prompting this change? The next question is, what new opportunity does this create for us? And then finally, how did I respond, or how should I respond to this new reality? And so let's go through it with this scenario. So the job that I had to do every time there was an assignment given to me for a photograph, I had to go to the event. I had to shoot the photos on film. We were using black and white film because we printed in black and white, and it was a lot cheaper that way, and we could develop ourselves. Develop the film in the darkroom. So that was the third step. Scan the negative, and then we had to clean it up because I don't know why, but I've never been able to get a clean scan from film. So I had to clean up the photo and then place it into the layout. We were using Quark Express to date myself even further, as if the digital film and digital photo transition wasn't enough. So that was the process. So what has changed culturally in this moment? Digital cameras got good enough so that we could skip the film development side, the scanning side, and the photo retouching side. You could still photo retouch if you needed to, like if there was something in the shot that needed to be removed or whatever, but you didn't have to. It wasn't nearly as common for you to have a problem with your image when it went from your camera straight into the computer. So culturally, we had a tool that we never had before. This was a revolutionary change for us in the process of creating content for the purpose of getting this in the newspaper. So what opportunity did that create? Well, that gave me the opportunity to capture a photo for this story that we were going to run the next day in the paper. So really the opportunity at a broader level, stories could actually be visualized much faster. You could still publish a story quickly with text, but the ability to attach a photo to it gave you such an advantage when it comes to speed. Like, think about it today. When you want to check a Major League Baseball score, you can pull up an app and find the score immediately. And I know that sounds like what's really basic. You could have, we've been able to do that for a long time. Sure. When my dad was a kid, he had to check the newspaper the next day in order to get the score from the previous day. Like, he couldn't even get those updates in real time. That's the speed of information transfer that continues to happen, by the way. I mean, I look at live videos, I could have a live video from my basement, which is bananas to me. But you can, and that's incredible. But this transition right here for us, we can now go out and have breaking news. As a college newspaper, the next day, we could have breaking news with visuals in the paper. That's a remarkable opportunity that created. And so then how did we respond? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. Every journalism, department everywhere responded this way. We've gone digital. We made the transition over to digital cameras. The speed at which we could capture and publish was just so astronomically different compared to where we were in the past using film. And so that was a major change that happened. So as you think about this in the context of your business, there are probably practices that you're doing that are antiquated and that need to get updated, and in some cases, completely changed. Maybe you need to shift from film to digital in some way, shape, or form, based on how you're doing things. The next scenario that was a really significant one for me, and it still impacts me today because it was a really foundational idea. The nature of education has changed completely. So this was about a decade ago now, probably in the 2009-ish. I started a YouTube channel. I know it sounds silly, but I started a YouTube channel helping people make the jump, not into freelance, but make the jump into barbecue. Fatty Bombatti's Guide to Barbecue. That was my channel. And what's been so interesting to me is to see how that was actually the beginning. It was an inflection point. I didn't quite see it at the time. The way that you used to learn barbecue was you knew somebody who was really good at barbecue. They knew what they were doing. They were, a master chef or pit boss or whatever. Well, I didn't have anybody like that around me, not in the area that I lived, but I loved barbecue and I wanted to get better at it. And so I jumped into barbecue without really knowing what I was getting into, and I learned a ton along the way. And I thought to myself, well, I bet there's other people who would probably like to know some of this information, because I did a lot of research on the internet prior to jumping in, and I didn't feel like I got quite the level of help that I would have loved, especially when you're talking about, these cuts of meat nowadays are, $100 for a full brisket or $150, whatever. It's a lot of money. So I wanted to make sure I had all the details and processes done right. So I started a channel. And so, how did we used to do it? You had to know somebody. You had to know a pit boss who could show you the ropes. What changed culturally? YouTube made the world of information transfer a whole lot smaller. All of a sudden now, I could go on YouTube or I could contribute on YouTube and share information about something changing, about something that, a new idea, a new concept. In this case, how to load a smoker, how to smoke cheese. Those are the kinds of videos that I was putting out. And it was incredible to me how much traction they gained. And so what was the new opportunity? Well, the new opportunity was that I could actually teach people barbecue anywhere in the world. I could just film it in my backyard and publish it on YouTube. And now all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of people were able to get into barbecue in some way, shape, or form, looking at the videos that I put out there. It was incredible to see these comments coming in of people saying, thank you so much. This was so clear. This was so helpful. Or even better for me, kind of from my teacher perspective, hey, I love this idea, but I don't know how to do this. Can you help me out? Yes, I can help you out. Let's talk barbecue. That's the best thing in the world. So that was really the opportunity that it created, is it let me become a teacher of barbecue, even though I didn't have proximity. That was huge. So how did I respond? Well, I responded by starting the YouTube channel, Fatty Bombatti's Guide to Barbecue. It also led to a book. It led to a website, all sorts of different content. I actually started catering on the side. It was a really fun season for me exploring what barbecue could be for me. But it all started because education changed. And as you're thinking about your business, what is the nature of the way that you distribute information? What is the nature of the way that people learn? It's not the same today as it was, 10 years ago. And I have a sneaking suspicion it's probably not going to be the same in 10 years as compared to where it is today. So those questions help you unearth some of these things to see some of those inflection points. The next one was very square in the crosshairs for the creative. We had a print magazine at the place where I worked, the church that I worked. We had a print magazine that featured articles from different people on staff and promoted upcoming events and that kind of stuff. We were finding that we actually weren't really sure how successful the magazine was. We knew that we were mailing a lot of them, but we didn't know if anybody still wanted them. We didn't know if they were reading them once they got them. There were just a lot of unknowns. And so culturally, what changed? So that's how we used to do it. We used to do it by printing a magazine in the thousands and then mailing them out to thousands of different people, having stacks of them around the office and around the church, all that kind of stuff. What changed culturally? Well, the digital shift was happening. We were starting to move into the digital distribution of information. And it wasn't just that the technology was there, because the technology had been there for a while. But this era was really called, Web 2.0. This is when Facebook really started emerging. It shifted out of kind of a little thing they were doing in Harvard, and it became a more public thing. But the big point of change was when Facebook no longer required an educational email. That was the shift. Because for a lot of people, they either didn't have them because they went to school a long time ago, or they had them but didn't have access to them. So they had them while they were in school and they didn't have access anymore. So Facebook eventually dropped that and anybody could join. And that's when things really began to explode. And so for us, we're distributing information, articles, you see this across the whole landscape of magazines in general. Magazines were just a transfer mechanism of information. That's really all they were. So now people were getting their information in a different way. Are we in that same approach? Like, are we doing it the same way? Or are we trying to hold on to our old practices in the print world? That was the real tension for us we had to navigate. And so rather than continuing to do it how we used to do it, printing the magazines and mailing it, we decided to acknowledge what was changing culturally. The way people consumed information changed. And we leaned into this new opportunity, which was we can distribute this in a digital way. What does that look like? I remember putting together a proposal to my boss to really say that we should move to what they were then called e-zines, online magazines. I found a great template that would power the whole magazine. I mean, the whole thing looked super slick. But as we had more and more conversations, my boss said something that actually has really informed a lot of the way that I think about communication and marketing and really just effective exposure of an idea. Does it make sense to build something and hope people come to it? Or does it make more sense to go where people already are? And so with that conversation, the conclusion of that conversation was, we're going to build our own Facebook page. So we did. So we started a Facebook page for our church, really earlier than many, I think. And we were posting some of the content that we would have normally put in our magazine. We're putting it on our Facebook page. And the growth was absurd. I mean, we were finding great success with it just because we were speaking the language of the people and we were moving into the way that people were actually looking to communicate. And so it was a big win, a huge success. That's how we responded. We moved to Facebook. We got rid of the print magazine and we repositioned it to be a Facebook page. So, you can see each of these are really like technology bound kinds of shifts. YouTube gave me the ability to teach in a way that I never could have without traveling across the country. The digital information transfer with a magazine was able to replace what we were doing with a print magazine. But I want to drive it home really, really closely with business, because all of these technology things will absolutely be influential in your decision making. but I want to show you what it looks like in business I want to show you what it looks like in business as well. So when I started my business, Lunchtime Heroes, in 2022, there was a big pressure point for me around church creatives. So what I was finding is that churches were really struggling post-pandemic. When I say struggling, they were struggling in that a lot of the creatives on their team were just burnt out. I was in that category. There was a stretch for me really in the very beginning of the pandemic. I was over communications, productions, and online ministry, all of the things that the church still was running during this stretch of everybody stay at home kind of thing, no gathering. And I worked 21 consecutive 12-hour days. It was 12 or more hours a day. I didn't track those specifics. I was so fried at the end of this stretch. I worried at times, am I even employable again? Like, could I even work again? That's how drained and exhausted I was. And this was something I thought would get better over time. But as time continued to pass and I was, still connected to the church, I looked around and I'm thinking to myself, this is not changing. And so in 2022, I said, I'm going to build something that can help churches navigate unhealth in the creative ministry area of things. So I started Lunchtime Heroes. That's the name of my business. And the premise is to help churches build healthy creative ministries in their church. Now, I started that with education. That's always where I go first. I love teaching. I love coaching. I love all of these things. But I started there because I thought information was the thing that people needed. So I created a course, a graphic design course. I've since created a communications course, like how to build a communications ministry. Then I moved into resources. I have a ton of tools and resources, things that I developed over my time leading communications, things that were really helpful for me. I built all these things out. I eventually wrote a book. The book is really intended to help creatives and non-creatives learn how to talk to each other. So, I'm investing all of this energy and all of this time into helping creatives be majorly equipped to navigate whatever situations they're facing internally on their church staff. And you know what I keep hearing? I keep hearing that creatives are leaving their churches, and in some cases, they don't know what to do. And so there was a stretch for me where in probably a 5 or 6 month period, I had conversations with, it was probably a half dozen people that I had been working with and partnering with and, maybe coaching or maybe just, in dialogue with, and they were all leaving. All of them were leaving their jobs. And it really caught my attention. And so this is really kind of the point here. Did I fail with Lunchtime Heroes? Well, no. It's still running. Like, it's still a business. I'm still helping churches. I'm still doing freelance work for them. I'm still doing graphic design. I'm still doing strategy work. I'm still doing coaching. I'm still doing all of those things. But I noticed a trend. And the trend is that there were a bunch of creatives who wanted to make the jump to freelance, but they weren't really sure how to. And so that's where Jump to Freelance came from. It was less of me saying, I'm sick and tired of, staff retreats. I don't like them, but it was less of me angsty about things. And it was more the fact that I was seeing a new problem emerge and I was positioning myself to be able to help solve that problem. And so I want you to think about this in the context of you thinking through making your jump to freelance. The reality is that you do not know the problem that you're going to be solving 3 years from now today. There's no way for you to know what that problem is because we don't know what's coming yet. We don't know what advancements will stick and which ones won't. I know everybody's talking about AI, and I think that there are some meaningful ways it can contribute to our business. But I also remember everybody talking about 3D TVs being like the future. I remember, the metaverse was going to be like the way that we worked. Some of these things just don't stick. And I think it's really important for us, if we're considering something new, to not get so bogged down in hoping that or thinking that this thing that we're creating right now, this is the thing. This is the way I'm going to do business successfully for the entirety of my life doing business or running my own thing. That's just not how it works. When we get hung up on finding the perfect thing or building the perfect solution, and that prevents us from making the jump, it's actually going to put us in a position where we will never quite be ready to make the jump. Or I would say almost worse than never making the jump is making the jump, realizing that what you created isn't the right solution, and then just sitting on it and hoping that somehow magically it'll start working, even though it's kind of tone deaf to the problems that exist around you. And so that's really the big takeaway for me in all of this. You want to make sure that you are open-handed enough when you jump so that you can begin making adjustments and pivots. And I think what's really important to know for you today, wherever you are in this timeline of dreaming about it, maybe making some plans about it, starting to actively prepare for it, or maybe you've already made the jump. Whatever it is that you start doing when you first make the jump to freelance, it's probably not going to be the only thing that you do. And so rather than holding that at such high esteem that you can't see the other things around you, the problems that emerge, the changes that you need to make, I want to encourage you to hold it loosely. And I want to encourage you to begin making some really proactive steps toward making the jump. Because what I have learned about my audience with Lunchtime Heroes is that my original approach to solving their problems was not the best approach, and it was not the most helpful approach for them. But I didn't know that until I started having conversations. And so you have to get your offer out there. You have to get your services out there. And in a lot of cases, you have to hear the feedback that this is missing the mark before you can start improving what you're doing and really honing it in. I want to reframe these questions a little bit for you so that you can ask these while you're considering sort of talking through the problems that you see in front of you. So the first thing that you can ask yourself is, how am I doing this today? Anytime you have something that you're working on, some offer you're presenting, and it just doesn't seem like it's clicking, it doesn't seem like it's quite getting traction. For me, I'm offering interim comm support, and it's like, it's just confusing enough where I think churches aren't getting it. So like, what is it that I'm doing today? The next question is, what has changed culturally? Has something shifted? Has something changed? Is there a disturbance somewhere? This could be a political party changed, that happened recently in the United States. It could be that a new technology emerged, or an old technology was sort of removed from the primary functioning, that it used to have. It could be that there's something on the horizon that's coming that seems really interesting or promising. Could be that there's a cultural behavior that's changing. I think about remote work versus on-site work. Any of those things. But what is changing culturally? What has changed culturally? And then the next question, what new opportunity does this create for you? Every time something changes, there's a new opportunity that's created somewhere for somebody. The more attentive we are to those changes, the more attentive we can be to spotting, or I guess the better we can see what some of those opportunities are. And then the last question, how can I respond? There's a formal tool for this. It's called the PEST analysis. And I think it's actually one of the most powerful tools that I don't hear a lot about. So if you wanted to, you could go look it up and find sort of the way that people go through the PEST analysis. But functionally, it's this idea of what are the opportunities that are emerging because of changes that are happening around me. As you're pursuing your freelance venture, whether you're making the jump to freelance, building a creative business, there are constant changes that are in your future. And that will not change. That's just not going to change over time. And it's even if you're focused, like I think, let's say you have a podcast, so this is a podcast that I do. Even the way that I approach podcasting has changed over the years. When I started doing podcasts, I was recording the audio to a physical, like external device, and then importing it into my machine. And then I shifted over and I could record directly to my machine. Now I'm including video as part of it, and I'm doing it through Riverside. So I'm not even recording onto my machine. I mean, technically I'm recording it and then it's uploading it right away. But those are seismic changes. Riverside in particular is something that allows me to have guests on my show in a way that was way more complicated prior to Riverside existing. Those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. Even if you're in a groove and you stay in that groove, there are changes within that groove. These questions help you identify it and unearth it. And my hope is that this is actually really encouraging. My hope is that as you're hearing these things, it demystifies a little bit of this fear that I have to have everything put together before I make the jump to freelance. You don't. Jumping to freelance just means you're a problem solver who is interjecting themselves into problems. Things are going to change. Your success as a freelancer is determined by your ability to navigate that change. And for me, that's really fun. That may not be fun for you, but that is the most life-giving thing that I have had in my career, is the actual ability to respond to problems with solutions. Not just spot them, not just have a meeting about how we should address them, but actually seeing a problem and then building and implementing a solution. So consider that if you're thinking about making the jump to freelance. I appreciate you listening to this episode. I'm really excited about my conversation in the next episode with Barbara. She is just a really sharp and insightful mentor. She was to me. And so I'm confident that you'll enjoy the episode as well. So until then.
Thanks for listening to The Jump Moment. To find support for your jump to freelance, join our community at jumptofreelance.com.